guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Erin.
I'm Elena, and today's video is going to be a roundup of books by Black authors that we truly love.
We already did a video dedicated to sci-fi and fantasy Black authors, if you want to check that out. So today's video is going to be focused on other genres, mostly fiction.
Yeah, I think I have one nonfiction. Do you have any nonfiction?
No.
Okay, great. Let's just jump right in.
Great. The first book on our list is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. This was the author's debut novel. I read it a year or two ago whenever it came out. So this book begins with two Ghanaian half-sisters in the 18th century. One is married off to an Englishman, and the other is enslaved and brought to America. And the book spans 300 years following their families and each generation up until present day. So it's a monster of a book.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Every chapter is a new generation.
Every chapter?
Yes, and they're only like 20-page chapters, so you're essentially getting little snippets of every generation from each side of the family, and you kind of follow them and the trajectory of their families based on what happened to these two half-sisters in the 18th century. It's fascinating. It kind of is a weird dichotomy. You're constantly feeling like you're looking at the bigger picture, but then also seeing a really zoomed in version. Yeah, and it's very beautifully brought together. This book really makes you question if any of the individuals in this story actually had any agency at all, or if they were merely a product of the historical forces beyond their control dating back generations ago.
Okay, so the first book that I'm going to highlight is sitting behind me. It is Love and Color by Bolu Babaloa. Erin knows this is one of my all-time favorite books. I've talked about it multiple times on the channel. This is a collection of love stories based on retellings of folktales and myths. You have your classic Greek myths here, but you also have legends from the Middle East. You have stories from all over West Africa, all over the world. They range from ancient civilizations to modern workplace settings because they're reimaginings of these folktales. And the couples are as diverse as the settings. These stories are all over the map, and it's so unique and beautiful. It's very, very romantic as a read. I read it all the way through and then immediately started a reread of my favorite short stories. I've also heard other reviewers say that they read them one at a time, like one story in between their other reads, almost as like a palate cleanser.
Yeah.
And I could see that being really fun as well.
I loved the short story format of this one. It was like very satisfying to
The
finish
audiobook is good too.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I might listen to it on audio next time.
Yeah, it's very well done. And this is one of my all-time favorite books. I highly recommend it. All right, this next book is technically fantasy, but it reads more like historical fiction, which is why I'm including it here. And the book is The Salt Roads by Nalo, Hopkinson. The book focuses on Azili. She is an Afro-Caribbean goddess who is reawoken by the cries of 3 enslaved women after a stillbirth. It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
But then the book jumps between different viewpoints as Azili possesses the bodies of 3 different women from different time periods. So you're seeing Azili experience the world through the eyes of different women.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
It's really cool. And the 3 women that she possesses are so interesting. My favorite storyline was Jeanne Duval. She's a former actress. She's a Black woman living in Paris, and she's having an affair with a famous poet, Charles Baudelaire. And then one of the other POVs is Henrietta. She's a young sex worker in 300 AD, the year 300 AD.
Right.
She's undertaking a pilgrimage to Jerusalem.
Okay.
From Egypt. So you get this cool like opening in Egypt.
Yeah,
it's
that's
very cool. And then lastly, you have Mare, who is one of the 3 enslaved women whose cries awakened Azili in the beginning of the book. Each chapter is a different one. And
but
in
it like
the beginning,
goes in between, like, oh,
right.
Yeah.
Like in the beginning, it's very heavily focused on Mare.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of Jeanne Duval, and then you sort of get Henrietta at the end.
Okay.
But they're all interspersed too.
Cool.
It's going to put you through the ringer, but it's cool. I do recommend, like, don't read a bunch of other books at the same time as this. You will get confused. Focus on this one if you want to read it. It's really good.
Okay, and the next book on our list is The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. If you watched our Best Books of 2023 video, then you know that this was one of my best books last year. It was my first by this author, and I'm still thinking about it to this day. The book is set mostly in the 1930s in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. It's labeled as a murder mystery, but that storyline is kind of just like the bookends of the story. It's not really the premise of most of it. So I have a hard time with that sort of murder mystery label that it gets given a lot. What the book's really about is the community of Chicken Hill, which is a predominantly Black and Jewish area of Pottstown.
So is this a neighborhood?
Yeah, there's no real main character in this book. McBride jumps between a multitude of POVs and subplots. And for most of the book, you kind of have no idea where you're going, which is probably why he put the murder mystery at the beginning and end to kind of
give it some structure.
Yeah, like center you a bit. But it ends up making the community at large your main character, and it feels very immersive and moving because you're seeing all these different facets of the community and how they engage, how they interact. It's very, very beautiful, and it's the first book I've ever read that I couldn't pinpoint one main character, but it doesn't seem to suffer from that. Probably some of the most recognizable characters are a Jewish couple, Moshe and his wife Shona, who own the Heaven and Earth grocery store and a theater, and Nate, who works at the theater, his wife Addie, and specifically their nephew Dodo, who is just the most lovable, sweet character you could ever read about. And kind of what happens to these central characters is loosely what drives the plot. This is an absolutely gorgeous book. I can't wait to read more by this author. Definitely recommend.
The next book on the list is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is a contemporary second chance romance. Eva is a single mom and a famous erotica author. Shane is like a reclusive, world-famous literary author. They spent a week together as teenagers and they like fell in love in 1 week, you know, as teenagers do.
Yeah.
And then they were separated by forces outside of their control. And there's some miscommunication going on here as well. And years go by before they cross paths again. And you come to find out that these books they've been writing over the years, they've sort of written each other into their books and have kind of been sending a message out into the world to the other one over all of these years that they've spent apart. I think the fact that they're both authors is kind of fun. You have a little bit of discourse about, is erotica not as valid of a writing genre, you know, compared to his like serious literary works. And I really enjoyed that discourse. I think it's interesting and something we do need to talk about. All genres are equally valid.
This book was sexy.
Yeah, it is sexy.
It was good.
It's got some spice.
It does have some spice.
The next book on the list is the nonfiction pick. I chose The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. This is nonfiction, like I said. Henrietta Lacks was a poor Southern farmer whose cells were taken without her knowledge and became one of the most important medical discoveries of all time.
What was the discovery?
So her cells are immortal. They don't die. Her cells are still alive today, even though Henrietta Lacks has been dead for 60 plus years, which makes them invaluable for medical advancements. They can make the cells reproduce and create a gajillion million of Henrietta Lacks cell tissue and then test all sorts of medical theories and stuff on it. In fact, I'll tell you what that stuff is. I wrote it down. I will read it because I will mess this up if I don't. They call them HeLa cells, like Henrietta Lacks shortened. Okay. Obviously, it's a little bit dehumanizing. That's the point of the book.
Yeah.
HeLa cells were vital for developing the polio vaccine, uncovered secrets of cancer, viruses, and the atom bomb's effects, helped lead to important advances like in vitro fertilization, cloning, and gene mapping, and have been bought and sold by the billions.
Interesting.
Billions of these cells. Her family didn't even know until like 20 years ago.
Interesting.
They had no clue. And meanwhile, people are making gajillions of dollars off of this. and they've never received any kind of compensation. And Henrietta Lacks herself was never acknowledged. It's crazy, and it's true. It really happened. That's what makes it so crazy.
I want to read this.
So this story focuses not just on these cool medical advancements, but on Henrietta Lacks herself, who she was as a person, her history, her experience, and finally brings her story to the forefront. I think that's very cool. It's an important read, but it's also like genuinely a good and fun read. And I don't say that about most nonfiction.
Fair.
This is a good one.
Okay, and the last one that I have today is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. I know that this is become very popular and is going to be a TV show, and I can totally understand why. This book centers around two siblings, Byron and Benny, and after their mother passes away, they are left with only a black cake, which was made from a recipe that's been handed down over generations, and a voice recording from their mother.
Oh.
Have you read this one?
No.
Okay. So in the recording, Eleanor tells her life story and shares a lot of secrets that she's been holding on to that her children were not aware of.
Whoa.
And it's incredibly interesting. So Eleanor, the mother, was an incredible swimmer and basically had to escape her Caribbean island home when she was younger because she was under suspicion of murder. So then she travels to America and goes through quite a lot of trials and tribulations to end up where she is when her children are born. So as Eleanor's secrets are finally very slowly uncovered throughout the book, you see how Benny and Byron are just having to grapple with all of these new revelations and how this really changes their perspective and their outlook. The book is really, really fast-paced. This book was very fast-paced and becomes a little convoluted as more characters and POVs are added as the story continues. And by the end, it was all a little bit of everything all at once. And I felt like the author couldn't quite choose exactly what she was trying to say. But I do think that it was a very, very compelling story of sacrifice and racial identity and family, and it's a beautiful read.
Cool. That sounds really interesting. I could see that working well as a TV show.
I could, yeah, they have a lot to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I want to quickly plug a book I just finished. It is Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson. This is a debut novel from an author that I am quickly obsessed with. Like, this book was incredible. I'm not going to go super into detail, but if you want my full review, I will be doing a whole page in my reading journal just for this book. So stay tuned for that video, which will probably come out next week. But I'll just tell you that it's a contemporary story about two young people falling in love in modern day London and struggling with identity, feeling seen, the threat of police brutality, and struggling to make it as artists. There's a lot here, but it's really beautiful. It's so romantic. If you like Sally Rooney, I think you'll like this. So that wraps up just a few recommendations from Black authors that are not specifically science fiction and fantasy.
If you like this video, please like this video. Subscribe if you're new here. We really, really appreciate it. And until our next video, we'll see you later.
See ya!